What's going on, folks? This is Luke Givens.
And this is Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
And you are listening to Colonized Minds podcast.
So to get started, Luke and I were talking a little bit earlier about financial aid and kind of how messed up it really is right now in the U.S. And so I thought we would go ahead and pick up from there.
So this system that we currently have with financial aid just makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, no, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that they're proposing to do now is through private donors or through companies, you would have your tuition covered in agreement or in exchange, there you go, for having, I think it's like 10% of your salary for like the next 10 or 20 years used to kind of like pay that back. So you can get your tuition paid for, but once you graduate and you begin to get a job, 10% of your salary is going to go towards basically paying back the people who covered your tuition. What do you think about that?
It's interesting.
Say more.
So there's a couple of things that come to mind right away, right? So it's almost like you're being taxed on your income. Or this is how I think about it. This is like how I conceptualize it. You're being taxed on your income for 10 years. And then does that mean if that 10% didn't cover everything that was actually used for your educational expenses gets erased, or do you continue paying 10%?
Oh, no, you keep paying 10%.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily like you borrowed $20,000 and then once you pay back $20,000, like that's it. Like, no, you pay whatever that ends up being. So now if you get a job coming out of college that is paying you, $150,000 a year, and you took out, let's say, $10,000 in loans, you're going to pay that back much quicker. You will actually pay that back and some compared to the person who gets out of college and, let's say, low entry level, they're making minimum wage, and they work minimum wage for 10 years. That person might never pay that money back.
Okay.
So then there becomes a very interesting argument there, because, and not to shoot this off into another direction, but then you'll have to start thinking about who gets those loans. There'll have to be some type of formula that then looks at earning potential. So who's a good investment and who's not? But sorry, go ahead. You didn't know I was going there.
Well, the U.S. doesn't have a very good history with that.
Hey. Now there is something else I could throw in. So, but overall, what do you think about that as a option?
It's hard to really make like a sound opinion on it without having specific details. Like, you threw a big wrench there. Like, if there is criteria for who gets these loans and who doesn't, like, that's a bit of an issue. I want to know more. Also, I want to know more about the payment plan. Like, does it stop once, you pay it? Does it not? Do you continue until it's completely paid off? So you're saying 10 years, but what if you don't get paid off within 10 years? Do you continue for, however long it takes? And then who are the donors? And do the donors have a say in specific stipulations, right? So, like, I know some donors, if you get a scholarship or a grant or et cetera from specific donors, you have to sign a contract saying you won't do X, Y, and Z for the duration of your college years. So does that come along with it as well?
Now, the donors are going to be private donors, right? So we're thinking about individuals, philanthropists. We're also thinking about companies, right? So now banks, this could potentially be a good investment tool for certain banks, right? Even credit unions, right? Think about that. Like, that's community credit union. It's almost like you're giving a loan to someone.
Is there interest?
I don't think there's interest. I think it's just again, kind of like those terms, but ultimately, they're kind of, even if there's not interest, there's still interest, if you get what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, like, same scenario, if you're making $150,000 a year, you only take out $10,000.
Yeah.
You actually end up paying $15,000.
Now, what's also interesting, and I'll just kind of throw this out, is to a degree, we already do that. Public service loan forgiveness.
Yeah, no, I thought about that as you were saying that.
Yeah.
So if you work for a public agency, so like PCC would be one.
Yes. Nonprofits, education.
Yep. You can do minimum payments for 10 years while working full-time for that agency, and then supposedly at the end, it gets forgiven.
Yes, whatever amount is still left on your loan gets forgiven.
However, even with that, there's the potential of them taking it away. Like there have been talks about them doing away with that program.
That's true. Yeah.
So for folks that have been planning to apply for the loan forgiveness at the end of the 10 years, they might not even reach that. Yeah.
So that, again, that's a very interesting thing. That one is not necessarily you have a standard repayment option, right? But then you also have an income contingent and income base repayment option that's also looking at the amount of money that you bring in, and that is your payment plan is determined on that. Or you can do a standard repayment option, which is ultimately what that ends up being over like a 20-year repayment period, right? Now, the other thing on the back end that people don't necessarily talk about with the public service loan forgiveness is whatever amount is forgiven then becomes taxable income. So
you're really still paying 30% of that taxable income.
You're still, again, you may not pay it back, but let's think about this. You look at your salary over a 10-year period of time, even working in public service, right? So think about what you are expecting. If you're just starting those payments, what do you anticipate paying or anticipate making in 10 years? What is your amount, your actual loan amount? What is that loan amount going to be in 10 years? So now, if you're in that 10th year and you make however many thousands of dollars a year, like if that's an extra $5,000, maybe that's not that bad. But if you went to a, small, private, religiously affiliated or liberal arts school somewhere in the Pacific Northwest, you might be looking at tens of thousands of dollars that you are now adding onto your income that you didn't anticipate, that zero on your deductions through your W-4 did not account for. Yeah. And now you're going to have a really big tax bill at the end of the year. So, again, something else to think about. But I think the bigger, I won't say the bigger argument, but the thing that I was thinking about with the kind of 10% of the income over 10, 20 years was the role that government has in doing that, and then the role that private business has in doing that. Right. Because government is currently doing essentially the same thing. Private business is now seeking to do that. And so how do people feel about that? Is that a thing that is okay to do or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because then also do the private investors or donors, do the private donors have a say in, I'm going to invest in this student because they're going to this school versus I really don't want to support this other school?
Yeah. I mean, I think that absolutely comes into play. And I think at some point it could just be completely benevolent, and it's a matter of just looking at a person's transcript or essay. It could just be that, right? But it could also be like, yo, I need your social security number. I want to know what neighborhood you came from. I want to know if you're a first generation college student. I want to know if there's any documented disability. Now, obviously, there's some stuff with FERPA that we would not be able to share, but ultimately, as a company, you would be making an investment. So you would want to make sure it's a good investment. And now there's an argument that could be made that even if it is a quote unquote bad investment, and remember we're talking about people here, but that it could encourage business to not just fund people's education, but also take more of an interest in support services to help students be successful because they are looking at these individuals as investments.
Right.
So they want to make sure that these students have everything that they need to be successful in college so that they can get good jobs and so that they can get a return on their investment.
It's interesting. Yeah, there's pros and cons to it. And I also wonder if it would fall under a tax write-off for the donors.
Oh, I gotta imagine it would. Yeah, and then there's another, not wrinkle, but there's another thing to add to this. It could very much increase the possibilities. It could increase the pipeline into employment. Right? Because I'm investing in this individual, I want to make sure that person is able to get a job. So it may mean I'm hiring that person entry level to work here. So even me paying them, kind of in a way, I'm only paying that person 90% because I get that 10% back.
Right.
Not bad, actually, if you think about it from a business standpoint.
It's hard.
It is.
Because, I mean, you can put it on paper and make a great presentation about it, but you can do that with a lot of things that have gone pretty sour.
Yeah, I mean, there was once a time where, like, if you wanted to come to the United States, you would sign your name on a piece of paper. They put you on a boat. You come over here, and then you work in a house or out in the field for a certain amount of time until you pay back your debt. Mm-hmm. It was called indentured servitude. We don't look at it in quite the same friendly terms that we do, or that maybe we did at the time. But there's an argument that could be made that, in many ways, this could be kind of a return to indentured servitude. Again, that's a much bigger kind of thing, but I think there's definitely some correlation there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
So who is saying this? Where are these ideas coming from?
So it is something that has actually been floated out. I actually began hearing about this maybe about a year ago. Mm-hmm. This was something that people were looking to do, but I don't know if you heard, but there's like a new administration right now since like January 20th. Mm-hmm. That since that new administration has come in, it's not from them necessarily, but we currently have an administration that might be more favorable to an option like that. And part of this is a way of looking at our current repayment plan and financial aid and how that whole situation works, the number of people that we have defaulting on student loans, but then also what some people may perceive as the government taking too much of a role in this process. Mm-hmm. Right. So right now there's a number of repayment options that people have, and so beginning to ask this question of how much of a role should government have in higher education, right, in the funding of higher education. Now, there's some people on one end of the spectrum that would say higher education should be an extension of the K through 12 system, and that every student who's eligible and able should have the right to go to college for free. That's one end. The other end, I think, of the spectrum is saying, no, financial aid higher education is a privilege, that it's not meant for everyone, that you should be able to, one, prove that you can excel in higher ed, and a matter of personal responsibility, you shouldn't even engage in it unless you know you have a plan to pay for it. And if you don't have a plan to pay for it, then you are being reckless and irresponsible. So there's kind of two ends of that argument. And so if you're on the other end of that argument that says financial aid or higher education isn't for everyone and doesn't maybe believe in aid necessarily, then you might believe that the government stepping in and providing that safety net or providing that cushion is a way of enabling irresponsible people. So people have taken out loans to pay for college when they knew they couldn't afford it, and this is a safety net that basically allows people to get out of repaying their debt. It's an argument that I've heard made. So
you've heard about this for about a year now.
Yeah.
I wonder if it is to be implemented, how long that would take, or if it's even occurring right now in like a small pilot scale.
I don't know. Maybe it's an executive order. No, but I mean, in order for it to be like really substantial, I mean, it would have to be, it could be an executive order, but I think in order for it to be substantial, I think it would have to go through Congress. Yeah. Like if it really wanted to have long-standing roots, I think it would have to. Yeah. Otherwise, another administration could come in and just completely reverse it. Right. Yeah. And then it gets into the question of, as a student, then what becomes your options, right? If you engage in this plan, what would be the safeguards, you know? Mm-hmm. From a business perspective, you would want to make sure that it's something that would last beyond an administration. Right. Oh man, it's just so tricky. It is. Because I can see things happening like tech companies only investing in schools that do research for tech. Mm-hmm. Or like trades organizations are only investing in schools that do career focuses on trades industries. Yep. So, but then, okay, so I get that. I understand that. But ultimately, in many ways, I mean, you kind of have that system already in place. I mean, you have individuals who they go through a 4-year system. They get great jobs because they have alumni that are very well connected that can put them in great positions, really high paid positions. And then part of what they are doing is that they're paying that money back to the institution to fund the next generation of folks. That generation comes through, they've got an entry point into a good paying career field. So there's a cycle that's already taken place. There's a network that's there that doesn't exist at a Portland State to the same degree. Not saying that Portland State doesn't have something similar, but it's not Harvard. So I mean, I get phone calls all the time from my grad school, and they have a very similar program. They take these kids all over the West Coast, even to the East Coast, meeting with alumni, talking to them, trying to get them set up with jobs when they graduate. And again, part of it is when they're making that phone call, like, hey, remember you participated in this program? Remember when you did this? All right, it's time for the get back. So how much can we pencil you in for? So again, there's kind of a system that already is there, that exists. I just think with this, you would probably see it more maybe drawn along industry lines, if you will. Now, the other option, if you are a company that's very well funded, you might go to a school that doesn't have a very high sticker price. You might even have more say in that academic experience. So there's an argument that could be made, could help the funding for lower funded schools. PCC, for instance, our tuition price is lower than some of our counterparts. Then as an industry, I might want to actually invest in that because my upfront initial cost is not very much. And I can bring those students through, help guide those students, create a pipeline into my industry that is going to pay pretty well. And then I'm actually getting more, as opposed to giving those scholarships or whatever it is to a school that has a very high upfront sticker price, meaning that there's more money to pay back. There's a capitalist argument that could be made that it actually could benefit schools with a lower tuition price.
Now, would that then change admissions regulations? So let's say like Nike decides that they want to fund PCC, right?
Let's do that. Can we please get that going?
And so then there's a pipeline between PCC students and Nike for employment. Now, does that change how an institution might do admissions, right? Because like if you're connected, that directly connected to a really lucrative organization for employment, do you ultimately like become more selective?
So I would say in a community college, no. Now in a 4-year college where you have very much kind of a closed admissions process, I definitely think that could be the case. In a community college, no. But what I also think potentially is that student who is coming in on that pathway that leads to Nike, I would imagine that student has a lot more support available to them than the student who's coming in and has absolutely no clue what they want to do. So there are going to be resources. This is kind of what I was saying earlier. I would imagine that Nike is also going to invest in resources that would ensure that student's success. Right. So now when that student has gotten that scholarship or whatever it is, because they've identified that they're on that track that then leads to Nike, they are guided into a PCC. They may even have their own advisor, right? And then there's those other programs that they're going to be guided. So there's going to be a support network around that system, student, to ensure that student is able to be successful, that may not necessarily exist for the undecided student. So I don't think at a community college it's going to affect admissions, but I definitely think there's a potential that you can have the same students have two different experiences. But now at a 4-year institution, I think it very much can have an impact on who gets accepted and who doesn't.
Right. By the way, this is an example of like how we troubleshoot ideas in the MC.
Yeah. Lots of this going on.
Yeah, back and forth of different potential outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is like, and this is something that happens pretty frequently, is that there's a problem. We have a really complicated problem, and then we throw forth a really simple solution, and we don't troubleshoot what happens when you implement a simple solution. Well, there's all of these different things that you weren't thinking about that could potentially come into play, and then we get shocked when those things happen. It's because we weren't patient enough to actually contemplate the ifs,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we do oftentimes in the MC. Like you said, like, we realize that if you have a complicated problem, you need a complicated solution.
Yes.
You can't just put forth a simple solution to a complicated problem. You didn't get to this point by being simple, so you're not going to get out of it by being simple. And it's really frustrating, I think, for a lot of folks who work with us sometimes, because
yes,
we definitely we pump the brakes on a lot of stuff, and we kind of go, okay, well, how is it going to affect this group of people? Or like, okay, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And people kind of like, oh, you're just being difficult. It's like, well, no, we're not being difficult. We
want to think things through really critically.
Yeah.
I've actually gotten in the habit of letting folks know that if I don't respond with a yes or no right away, it doesn't mean that I don't want to work with them. It just means that I'm thinking things through.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to them later.
Yeah. And sometimes it is going to be a no.
Yeah.
But
other times it'll be a yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, it also gets into what you're asking me. Like, if you're asking me something that's really, really simple and I'm taking time to think about it, then what you asked me wasn't quite as simple as you thought. There are definitely some ifs that I'm contemplating that you may not have.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, when you initially put in the request, you would have said, oh, and I know these are some of the factors that you have to consider.
But I think we're running out of time.
We are.
So do we have any upcoming events or announcements?
We do. March 10th, this Friday, we're going to be screening the film Do Not Resist, which talks about the militarization of the American police force. I think it does a really good job of kind of balancing the pros and cons of this kind of current issue or debate. This is going to be taking place immediately after the teach-in, which is also scheduled for March 10th. So the teach-in is going to be from 12 to 3. It's going to be in Terrell Hall 122. And then Do Not Resist is going to be immediately following the teach-in right around 3:30. There's going to be some hors d'oeuvres, some desserts, refreshments. I think I was trying to put both of those words together. But yes, so that's going to be taking place this Friday. So it's a great way for those folks who are going to the teach-in to kind of keep that momentum going and check out the film. There should be some really good conversations taking place. So I'm really, really excited about it. And our advocates have really taken the driver's seat on that screening. So that'll be happening this Friday.
Then on March 15th, the entire AMC staff is going to be presenting our workshop on the intoxicology of America. And so essentially we've done quite a bit of research on different holidays within the U.S. That are predominantly celebrated in terms of national...
They're celebrated by drinking. That's essentially what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so holidays that are celebrated by drinking, how did they get there? Why is that different from where their original origins were, and why?
Yeah. So, and again, this was one of those things that was a conversation that we began having in the MC, and then it turned into a workshop. So we're having conversations about some of the easy ones, like a St. Patrick's Day, which we know of as a drinking holiday, and Cinco de Mayo, which is known as a drinking holiday. But we don't know why. But then we were having conversations about like Christmas. There's a lot of people who drink during Christmas, right? That's turned into kind of a party drinking holiday for a lot of folks. Not in the same way as like a Mardi Gras, but American holidays being used as an excuse to drink. How did that happen? How did it get there? And in doing our research, we found it's very, very, very fascinating. It's fascinating how some of these holidays, how far they have come from their historical roots.
So we'll be doing that on March 15th from 1 to 2 p.m.
Should be fun.
All right, so this has been Elizabeth Guzman Arroyo.
This is Luke Givens.
Saying, so what if it's true?